Good morning everyone and welcome to this roundtable. Apologies for the slight delay in start there due to some technical issues. Train operators have previously developed a reputation for being inward looking and lacking the capacity or even the willingness at times to engage collaboratively with authorities. Fragmentation between partners has also contributed to the complexity of working within the rail industry. The West Coast Partnership has been deliberately designed to break that mould and put in place a framework for external collaboration that will link our business decisions, particularly around the design and development of high-speed train services, to the economic goals of strategic regional authorities. So today we've invited some of our most important partners for the North West to discuss the government's recent announcements on plans for levelling up the North and to build back better, which I understand is a phrase that didn't originate in Westminster. We are hugely grateful to Andy Burnham and Steve Rotheram for their time during this busy period, and David for sharing his expertise from TFM. And we will also take the opportunity to tell stakeholders about our role in the delivery of high-speed train services and discuss how we can do this collaboratively with local authorities and strategic transport authorities through our West Coast Partnership Development business. An RMD of WCPD will say more about this during this discussion, and we look forward to hearing from our panellists and taking questions from those of you who have joined today's debate. I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, to share his opening comments. Andy, over to you.
Thanks very much, Natasha. Good morning, everybody. It's just over 6 years since George Osborne came to city centre Manchester to launch the idea of the Northern Powerhouse. And I think you'd be hard pressed to say that we've made substantial progress towards his vision in those 6 years. It's been frustrating at times, but more positively, the hope of building a Northern Powerhouse is still there, and we're still working towards it. When George Osborne made his speech, it very much was a speech that placed rail investment at the heart of a vision of a new North. And it was hopefully, or it was felt to be at the time, maybe a departure from what we'd seen before, rather than a sense of low ambition for the North and often second best when it comes to transport issues, sort of going in the other direction about ambition and getting the best that we could do and using transport as a catalyst for that. I have to say, 6 years on, I don't think the Department for Transport or indeed the Treasury fully, if they got the memo, they didn't really agree with it. And my experience, and I think Steve would say the same, is that it's been frustrating these last 3 years for us, but 6 years as a whole, trying to make this Northern Powerhouse concept truly come to life, because it's always a fight, to be honest, to get the industry to think about ambition and also to think about place in its broadest sense, rather than just delivering rail projects. And still, we need to keep on to make that change. If I could just illustrate a few examples of what I'm trying to say. So let's start with the Transpennine route upgrade. It's been, again, frustrating because it's very much been a cost-driven project, or till recently, where the government is saying, well, this is the envelope, we've got so much, we'll get the best we can for this money, rather than actually what it should be, in my view, which is about what's the right ambition for the North. And of course, the right ambition for Transpennine route upgrade would be full electrification. It would be fully freight compatible. But until very recently, those things had been downgraded. And it's only actually through Transport for the North that we have been able constantly to come together and say to the government, as one group of Northern leaders, no, this ambition isn't high enough. You need to go further. And it was encouraging when Grant Shapps came to Manchester recently to launch the Northern Transport Acceleration Council that the ambition had been upgraded again, but it's been a struggle to achieve that. I'll give another example. Central Manchester rail capacity, again, a constant fight. The industry had agreed on a project to deliver the Northern Hub, as was years ago, with the extra platforms at Piccadilly to create that capacity through central Manchester. And yet my experience as mayor is constantly having to fight to get that back on the agenda, and the industry sort of saying it doesn't like the project but doesn't come up with an alternative. It says it has done now, but I'm still waiting to see it. And again, it's this frustration. It's as if when the Northern Powerhouse speech was made, you know, people didn't kind of fully buy into it, and the rail industry carried on doing what it had always been doing, when in fact it was an opportunity for the rail industry to say, look, we're being put centre stage here in terms of how we can drive economic development, and I'm afraid the industry's never fully grasped that opportunity. The third example would show it more plainly than anything, and that's HS2 at Manchester Piccadilly, because we've been in a long-running argument with HS2 and indirectly with the government about the plans for Piccadilly. Again, it seems as though it's what can we get away with rather than what is the right ambition for this place that would be the very kind of centrepiece of a northern powerhouse. And it's us that have always had to try and put the ambition back in to this, rather than the government delivering the ambition that it said it would deliver when George Osborne first made his speech. So for us, a surface station option with a turn back for Northern Powerhouse Rail has never been the optimal solution, not from a railway sense, but also not from an economic development sense, because it just takes all of the land, if you like, around Piccadilly and doesn't maximise the potential for growth at what would be the very heart of the Northern Powerhouse. And again, frustrating, but in this example, the government again has shown perhaps it's willing to rethink, and I very much welcome the High Speed North initiative and the determination to look at this as part of an integrated rail plan. So the way I would describe things, Natasha, in terms of to summarise, it's been a frustrating few years where we have constantly seen the ambitions watered down by the government, and as Transport for the North, we constantly be trying to bring them back up again. More recently, I'm encouraged with the way the government is now approaching things. We have had an ambitious statement about Transpennine made recently. The government has finally agreed to conduct a like-for-like comparison of the surface station at Piccadilly with a true underground option of the kind that Manchester City Council and myself have argued for. We're told that a plan for Central Manchester capacity is back on, yet to see the details, but that sounds encouraging. If the government is serious about a Northern Powerhouse, it has got to put the ambition in rail delivery. And if it carries on arguing all of the time with Northern leaders about these schemes, then we aren't going to get the delivery that everybody wants to see. So, you know, for me, I would say, you know, having sort of been through these issues a number of times now, we're at a critical moment now. Are we going to put in place the right rail investment in the north of England to change its fortunes as an economic entity in the 21st century? And if we are, that requires two things guiding rail investment. Number one, a sense of place, building places as opposed to just delivering rail projects, and that's something I don't think yet the industry has fully understood. And number two, a sense of ambition rather than what can we get, what's the least we can spend and get away with it sort of mentality, which I still perceive to be quite widespread. So challenging, but I'm not going to make any apologies for being challenging, because this is critical to us. You know, why should we accept second best? The North has always been asked to accept second best, and this time we're not going to do it. We're constantly going to go back to Network Rail and the government and HS2 and say, no, you promised us a Northern Powerhouse. We're not going to be sold short. We want that ambition to be at the heart of it all. And, you know, we still can deliver that ambition. It's been a frustrating few years, but we still have that chance to deliver ambitious rail projects that will be at the heart of a revitalised North. And, you know, we will keep making that argument. If levelling up is to have any meaning, you have to sort of take what has been done in London with regard to rail investment, yeah, and demand the same for the North. If you look at the money that's been spent on London train stations over the last 20 years, it is colossal, huge investment. Pretty much every main London station has had a complete overhaul. and yet we are still arguing for Manchester Piccadilly to be treated in the same way. So that's the challenge. We haven't given up yet. There is still a chance to have this ambitious transformative investment in the north, but it is 6 years and counting since George Osborne delivered that speech. And if it goes on much longer, these arguments that have been running ever since, then people will in the end lose patience and lose trust. So that's where we are today, Natasha. Maybe I'll leave it there and be interested to hear from others.
Okay, thank you for those opening comments, Andy. We'll definitely come back to some of the points you've raised there, particularly around opportunity and ambition. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Caroline Donaldson, who's the Managing Director for the West Coast Partnership Development. Caroline, over to you for your opening comments.
Thanks, Natasha. Good morning, everybody. I suspect the question in many people's minds is not so much is really around who or what is the West Coast Partnership Development or WCPD. Well, we're very much the new kid on the block. We started at the same time as the new franchise in December. We're part of the West Coast Partnership and we sit alongside the Avanti West Coast operating business. So WCPD is the shadow operator for High Speed 2, working in partnership with government, High Speed 2 Limited, Network Rail and with communities to design, develop and mobilise future high speed rail services. Our vision is for a new era high speed rail service that generates nationwide prosperity and pride. We'll help to deliver a seamless expansion to a high speed network for customers, shrinking the distance between our regions, bringing them closer together. We'll also deliver a step change in customer experience and integrate high-speed services across the existing rail network to provide faster, greener travel opportunities. We'll deliver value for money for passengers and taxpayers through service excellence, which will drive connectivity, boost regional growth and employment and support economic recovery. The new railway will drive a reduction in pollution and carbon emissions and lay the foundations for the future of safe and sustainable UK transport. To do this, we'll be advising Government and HS2 Limited on delivery of the new high-speed railway, ensuring that customer needs are central and reflected in the design of state-of-the-art services, including modern trains and better stations, integrated and faster timetable, digital ticketing and simpler fares. We're not responsible for building the HS2 infrastructure. We'll also act as a critical friend to High Speed 2 Limited. That means we'll bring an operational perspective to their overall design and build decisions, helping to deliver a railway fit for the future. West Coast Partnership Development will design and deliver punctual high-speed rail services which attain global standards of performance excellence on the new railway. Importantly, we'll also act as the bridge between the new high-speed railway and the existing network, ensuring this next generation of high-speed services improves the existing intercity connectivity for our towns and our cities. And it needs to integrate seamlessly with other transformative transport projects in the Northwest, the wider North and the Midlands. That includes working, of course, with the recently launched Northern Transport Acceleration Council to transform connectivity as part of the government's vision for High Speed North. The additional capacity will also allow us to dramatically reconfigure the rail network in its ability to accommodate more freight and support a modal shift from the polluting road and air journeys as we move towards net zero. But we cannot do this alone. We need to work with stakeholders to unleash the investment and growth potential in these services so that they drive regional economic growth, create jobs and support the green economic recovery. The government established West Coast Partnership as a new partnership model for rail to ensure that this unprecedented investment in high-speed infrastructure achieves maximum benefits for communities and for regional economies. Rail investment is a catalyst for growth and transformation. Together we can generate that success in cities, towns and rural communities across Britain. We'll be working with stakeholders in all regions and nations that are served by West Coast Partnership and across all tiers of government, including with the subnational transport bodies, alongside businesses, academia and others to help shape this future of high-speed rail services and crucially to secure the development opportunities that they bring. We'll make it easier than ever before for stakeholders to do business with us through our proactive engagement programme. Helping to build a state-of-the-art railway requires global expertise with comprehensive and unrivaled understanding of high-speed operations, the British rail market, and passenger trends and customer needs. Our team is drawn from two of the world's leading transport companies, including experts in high-speed, commercial, programme management and rail technical disciplines. We're well placed to champion the voice of the passenger, focusing on operations, timetable, fares and services. But this unprecedented level of spending required in the post-pandemic world. Ensuring the best value for money for every pound of taxpayer and passenger spend is even more important. We'll deliver that value for money through disciplined cost management to create a reliable and growing rail network, meeting the needs of passengers, taxpayers and communities. That means supporting the DfT and High Speed 2 Limited in the development of evidence-based spending decisions on high-speed trains and new facilities. It also means working with local and regional stakeholders to understand where the wider economic opportunities lie, how we can support levelling up our regions, bringing them and their economies closer together. We look forward to working in partnership with you. Thanks, Natasha.
Thank you, Caroline, for your opening comments there. I'm delighted to now be able to hand over to Steve Rotheram, who is the Mayor of the Liverpool City region. Steve, welcome, and could we hear from you for your open comments?
Thanks, Natasha, and it just shows you, doesn't it, with the technical difficulties this morning, that sometimes you need to physically be in places, and hopefully what Andy said and what I'm about to say will justify the spend on getting better transport connectivity, so people sometimes can end up in the that they need to. Again, just if you touch one of these buttons, it's in danger of the whole thing could blow up at any stage. So I'll try and plow on. I think the main thing to identify, of course, everything that I'm going to say is predicated on the reality that COVID hasn't gone away and it's going to be with us for some considerable time. And it doesn't mean, though, that we can't look at strategic issues. We have to put important things like Northern Powerhouse Rail and HS2 back on the national agenda for when we come out the other end. And of course, I've just mentioned about connecting up our great northern cities, for instance. The government have a promise to deliver on that, because they pledged it not just by words but in black and white. They said on page 29 of the Conservative Party manifesto from last year that there would be the building of a northern rail line connecting us up coast to coast. And indeed, Andy and myself met the Prime Minister last year, and earlier this year in February, he confirmed, for instance, that HS2 would be built in full, and he said that NPR would also be built in full. And that's the only way, really, if we're ever going to rebalance the economy, that we're going to be able to achieve that. Connectivity across the north is absolutely essential. And I keep on explaining to people who talk to me from other countries about the fact that we are the most politically centralised democracy in the OECD, and we still have the most unbalanced economy in the whole of Europe. And we have a Whitehall and Westminster model of governance that has for too long failed the north in favour of the south. And but myself and Andy were MPs, and we saw how that place does become a Westminster bubble, and there is, or appears to be, an obsession at times with the south and southeast. But there's 16 million people in the north, and we face poorer outcomes on health, education, skills, housing, and transport too. And so to address this disengagement with the centre, we need the urgent rebalancing of the UK economy from the south to the north. And that doesn't mean that London and the south and southeast have to lose. It is about us making exponential gains to catch up. And I believe NPR's absolutely essential to allow us to do that. It would increase the GVA in the Liverpool City region alone by an estimated £15 billion. It would increase our ever improving pre-COVID, unfortunately, visitor numbers by about 6.3 million people, and it results in about 24,000 jobs in our area alone. But in order to do that, we need NPR to be ambitious, and this is where Andy and myself have significant problems with this levelling up agenda, because we simply will not accept a suboptimal option for NPR. We've heard a lot about Grant Shapps talked about this Northern Transport Acceleration Council, but myself and Andy have been invited onto it and we've accepted. But this has to be about speeding things up. But it's not about getting the cheapest option to connect the north across from the west to east. London wouldn't accept the cheapest option, and neither should we. And Andy's spoken about Piccadilly. We've got other issues. So we want the new station somewhere in the vicinity of Lime Street, but we want that to go through an underground option in Warrington, right the way to Piccadilly, and of course then on to Leeds and everywhere else. The fact that ourselves in Greater Manchester and both of the Cheshire councils and Warrington, we're all signed up to say what our option is, means we can save the government time, because it's no good them investigating options such as Fiddler's Ferry, which nobody is signed up to. And as I say, I don't think if this was happening down south that they would be looking at the cheapest option. They'd be looking at the best possible option. That's what we want. NPR will reduce congestion. It'll encourage that modal shift that we did start to see pre-COVID. It'll improve the air quality, and it's good to see that some of the funded methodology now can include some of them social agenda issues rather than just purely green book. And myself and other Northern leaders have all asked for a new methodology which includes some of those social gains. We want to support health and well-being. It will create the agglomeration effect, truly. Again, it's been mentioned about the Northern Powerhouse. This really would be a Northern Powerhouse. And of course, that will improve further investment. But for me, from the Liverpool City Region's perspective, we are going to be a strategic port of importance to the UK, certainly in a post-Brexit world. And that means that we need better connectivity, and better connectivity will mean getting freight off the road and onto rail. And that will have huge consequential benefits, not just to the economy, but to climate emergency and a whole gambit of things to attract people, obviously, to visit our wonderful city region. So look, I'll leave it at that. We are going to push NTAC, that Northern Transport Acceleration Council, to do what we need them to do. But I'll hand over now, Natasha. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Before we get stuck into some questions that are coming through from the audience, I'd just like to finally introduce our fourth panellist, David Hoggarth, who's the Strategic Rail Director for Transport for North. David, over to you for your opening comments.
Thanks, Natasha, and thank you very much for the opportunity to participate. So, Transport for the North, we've got the ambition, and I think we can help both the Northern leaders and government deliver on the Northern Powerhouse agenda. We represent all the local transport authorities and the 11 LEPs across the north of England as well, as England's first subnational transport body. We also have a role co-managing the Northern Transpennine franchises and providing advice on other franchises, including West Coast as well, where they pass through our area. We can make statutory advice to the Secretary of State, and we've done that, as Andy said, on Transpennine route upgrade, and more recently on the Castlefield corridor and central Manchester congestion issues. We argued very strongly for growth in the Northern and Transpennine franchises after years of stagnation, and we're now seeing the fruits of that in terms of the new trains come into place, and they should all be in very, very shortly. Clearly, COVID has had a massive impact on rail services. We're about 30% of demand at the moment, and there's a real need to ensure that we don't take the foot off the pedal here in terms of investment. There's an opportunity to get this levelling up done while demand is a little bit lower, but continue with the ambition as well. One of the things we've done is set out in our strategic transport plan our ambition for the whole of the north of England, so supporting the 1.1 million businesses across the north. And the aims of the plan are about connecting people, connecting businesses and moving goods around efficiently. If the plan comes to fruition, we can deliver and support £100 billion of GVA growth and about 850,000 new jobs across the north of England. Of course, Northern Powerhouse Rail is a core part of that strategy, but it's not only that. Investing in the existing rail network is as important as well to grow the markets in advance of Northern Powerhouse Rail and other investments around HS2. So Northern Powerhouse Rail will continue to be a priority. We'll be submitting a strategic outline case to government early next year and working on the detailed route alignments during the course of this year. One of the things in our strategic transport plan, which actually is based on an independent economic review, so it's absolutely rooted in supporting the economy, is looking at strategic development corridors. And we've taken a different approach to traditional transport planning and looked at how you link clusters and economic centres. So whether that's the Port of Liverpool, Port of Workington, Liverpool and Manchester airports, Sellafield up on the Cumbrian coast, or tourism in the Lake District, whatever it may be, we've looked at corridors that support that and the clusters of growth. And I think we're here talking about the Northwest today, and the fact that the Northwest features in 5 of the 7 strategic development corridors that Transport for the North has set out, I think is really significant. It's really at the linchpin of movement across the north of England. If we take the West Coast to Sheffield strategic development corridor, that's really about includes most of the West Coast main line, and it's really about linking advanced manufacturing, health, digital technologies in the Sheffield City region with emerging technologies in Lancashire and Cumbria in particular, but also through the hubs in the northwest. So our long-term rail strategy aims to bring together the investments within our strategic development plan and put some specific proposals on rail. It's around connectivity, so improving journey times in particular. So it can't be right that it takes 8 hours or more to travel between the Port of Liverpool and Drax power station, taking important fuel that keeps the energy flowing for the nation. And that's why things like Trans-Pennine route upgrade to get those journey times down, get the freight capacity on, are so important. It's also about capacity of the network and on train as well, reducing some of the crowding we've seen in recent years. Improving performance for customers, supporting communities and looking at stations as hubs and community assets, as well as places just to simply board a train. And of course, cost effectiveness as well is absolutely critical. If we're going to make that case, and it's not just a financial case, it's a broader economic case for the North, we need to ensure that our railways are cost effectiveness and we can get some of the costs, some of the very high costs of delivering schemes down to something that's more reasonable and is seen in other industries. Clearly, COVID, as I mentioned, has created a massive challenge for the industry, but there are also some opportunities. We've seen better performance on the rail networks, and we need to bake that in and retain that. We want to make sure that services are built back in a way that builds in and locks in that better performance. And also changes to travel patterns provide opportunities. If we can have less people travelling in the morning peak because people have changed their pattern of working 5 days in an office, more sustainable modes as well, that will make railways more cost effective and easier to plan for the peaks at different times of the day. So we can do all those things. We can build back a better level of service. We're in the process of submitting an economic recovery plan to government, 150 projects that we think can be delivered over the next few years, some of which are absolutely ready to go. We'd like to see a pipeline of investment across the north of England and an end to the stop-start investment that really has been a problem in the past. So in conclusion, COVID presents a lot of challenges, but there's also some opportunities. Our fundamental objective, supporting economic growth, remains true. Transport is absolutely key to economic growth. We want a better connected north, and really it's really important that the north is at the centre of that. The north is best placed to help deliver that economic recovery and growth. Thank you, Natasha.
Thank you, David, and thank you all for your opening comments. I'm going to get straight into the questions now because there's lots of questions coming through, particularly around Andy's opening comments and Steve's around ambition and opportunity. The first question here from Councillor David Mellor from Stockport. David asks, Stockport will see HS2 services stopping as part of phase 1 and 2A, but not 2B. We must ensure Stockport features as a stop using cross-compatibility, something that Andy has worked very hard on and has cross-party support. Can you commit to looking at this again? Caroline, is this something that you could pick up?
Caroline, you're on mute.
Sorry, you'd think after 4 months at this, I'd be used to that by now. Yeah, we'll be looking at service options for phases 1 and 2A over the next 2 years to make recommendations to the DFT, and that'll be then followed by a formalised consultation. What DFT have said to us is that we should be looking as widely as possible. They're not in any way seeking to limit our ambitions on that, so that we can try and deliver the best possible results. 2B, phase 2B, is not currently included in that piece of work, but I think, as everybody will be aware, the government is looking at the phase 2B solution very much in conjunction with Northern Powerhouse development. But of course, with the work on 2A, we'll be trying to set that in the context of 2B so that we get a continuous solution. So working with the new body on that and with Transport for the North will be really key.
Thank you, Caroline. Based on things that we've heard so far, would like to ask, what are the key priorities for investment and devolution to achieve real transformation, and what do you need from partners? And I'm opening this question to the mayors specifically. It'd be great to hear your views on that. Andy, would you like to kick us off?
Thanks, Natasha. And obviously I began by talking very much about rail investment and its kind of central role in building the Northern Powerhouse. But you know, in the best will in the world, many of us will be long gone from our roles by the time anyone steps on any of these services. And I think you know, we do need to have more focus on the here and now, the real experience of people trying to travel across the north of England. We've got to do these two things simultaneously, and it's certainly a message that I've given to the Transport Secretary. You know, we can't have a narrative that says levelling up is done through infrastructure alone. It simply won't mean anything to most people anytime soon. And I think the thing that we most need in Greater Manchester is what I always describe as a London-style public transport system. One which is highly integrated, which has a cap over what people can spend on a daily basis, no matter how many buses, trams or trains they get. And I think it requires everybody to sort of think differently about transport policy if we're to deliver that. You know, the vision is of a zero carbon, as Steve was saying, integrated, affordable public transport system. We've got to remember it's so much more expensive to travel around the north of England than it is to travel around Greater London because of the lack of that integrated ticketing option and that capped system. And that holds people back from job opportunities. Sometimes it makes people opt for the car as the first option because it's often the safer, cheaper option. And we won't achieve our ambitions for as long as that remains the case. So, you know, simultaneously alongside the building of big infrastructure, we need this focus on the here and now, and it means power over the system to run a London-style operation. And we are at a moment here where the government, the UK government, is subsidising public transport outside of London at a scale it's never done before. The message I would give is this is therefore the moment for reform, and it needs to keep that investment in the system and help cities like ours, and Steve has similar ambitions to move towards an integrated London-style city regional transport system What do we need from people in the industry? It's cooperation with that vision, as opposed to, I think sometimes feels to me, pulling in the same direction. I need people to look beyond the rail industry. You know, people have to think about all modes and how they knit together, rather than sort of mode by mode, which sometimes is a bit frustrating in terms of how people see things. And I think we need to get on with doing this quickly. We've got to make sure that transport is at the heart of recovery in our cities. As Steve said, it's going to be a challenge running public transport, certainly for the next year. But as we come out of that, we've got to kind of quicken the pace of reform. And I would say it needs to be also linked to the clean air agenda, where we're bringing through zero emissions vehicles. So we're both simultaneously rising to the clean air challenge, as well as improving public transport. So I think that, what do I need? People need to buy into the vision and work with us. One of the first things that I experienced as Mayor of Greater Manchester was resistance from the industry to station devolution. You know, rail stations are at the heart of place, and I think we need people to start to think a bit differently about how a public transport system can stimulate growth and build more vibrant towns and cities, and think beyond the confines of the transport system itself. So it's a big agenda. I think that will make more difference to people in the north than any infrastructure anytime soon. I think realistically we could have a London style system within 5 years, but it needs everybody to buy into that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Andy. And Steve, did you want to add to that? What's your view on what do you need from partners?
Yeah, I'll just agree with Andy, so I won't repeat much of that. What we do need is more, so we need more power and resource that's devolved from Whitehall and Westminster to our localities. And look, that's not just power for power's sake. It is because you can get a bigger bang for your buck by doing things at a more localised level than having to wait for a central bureaucracy and a procurement process. And we saw that with PPE, trying to do things that we could be much more nimble at doing at a local level. So just on the transport thing, what would we want? Well, there's this thing called the Bus Services Act 2017. It's a cumbersome piece of legislation. I think it's partially designed to be impenetrable so that you can't get what the outcome is. And one of those outcomes is Manchester have identified they're looking for franchising. It's certainly our emerging lead option for franchising. We'd like to pursue that because that integrated model that Andy spoke about, we've got obviously trains, the Merseyrail Underground, we've got buses, we've got ferries, and active travel's the other part of this. We want to pull it all together, and we're the only people who could actually do all of that. And so I want full control. I want the Merseyrail network to be devolved to the combined authority, and that's what I'm currently fighting for.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Another question from the audience for yourself, David. What does the new Northern Transport Accelerator programme mean for transport for the North?
Well, we very much welcome the Acceleration Council. Anything that speeds up delivery of infrastructure in the north has got to be a good thing. So whilst we're waiting to find out details of that, the key thing is about working in partnership. So you know, another part of this is perhaps having more DFT staff in the north. We actually already have some through the Rail North partnership based in the north, and we see the advantage of that. People who are living and breathing rail services day in, day out, see what commuters are dealing with. So there's lots of advantages there. So it's really about making sure we work in partnership, and if the commitment is there to deliver more quickly, then that's absolutely what we want to see, and we'll support that, and you know, hold the feet to the fire on delivery.
Natasha, it's Andy. Would you mind if I just said something on that as well, because it's a really important question. Steve was absolutely right before, where he said it's both speed and ambition that the North needs, and it's not one or the other. And the role of Transport for the North, it seems to me, if the new council is bringing the speed, the acceleration, the role of Transport for the North is always to hold out for the ambition. And actually, that's what it's been doing in the last few years, and be that single voice for the North in saying to the government, no, this isn't good enough. And you know, for me, it's those two things together: speed and ambition. We would all say, I think, on Transport for the North, we don't just want it built quickly, we want it built right. And TFN has that critical role in spelling out what right looks like.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, David. And another question. So the government has announced over £600 million worth of investment in the Northern Rail network to drive improvements across the region. You know, is this enough to support economic recovery and growth needed in the North? And this will be our final question for the panelists before we take closing comments. So I'm going to hand over to Caroline to start us off on this one.
Well, I think it's very exciting, first of all, to see the money released. I think I'll let Andy and Steve comment on whether it's enough. But obviously, you know, we've heard loud and strong from Andy and Steve that the bringing the East and West together is a key priority for the North. And I think the fact that the council is headed by Grant Shapps shows just how important it is. And I think we're very conscious of the need to work with that council to make sure that what we're doing is properly integrated into that, so that we get the combined benefit from both schemes and others. Thanks,
Caroline. So if there's no other comments on that question, then I'd like to take the opportunity to have your closing comments before we run out of time. Steve, I'm going to start with yourself. Any final comments you'd like to add to the roundtable?
Yeah, and again, Natasha, I'll be brief, because it's not just all about intercity stuff. That's really important to the whole country. But for most people, for instance, in our city region, 82% of public transport journeys are on the bus. And so we need to get our intra-city systems up, running, of a quality, of a regularity, of a fare structure that attracts people to modal shift away from the car. It has to be more attractive. Look, again, when we both MPs down in London, we'd get the bus. Everybody got the bus. When you came out of Parliament and you turned left, there was a bus stop immediately there. Me and Andy would walk past, and there'd be the cleaners from some of the canteens. There would be loads out of, you know, the chamber. Everybody would do it. So they created a culture by which the quality and the regularity meant that they would use buses, and we just haven't got the same. That's why it's so important to look at the internal stuff and then to have that connected onto the big strategic stuff. But we'll get more delivery on the sort of the intra-city stuff. As Andy said, you know, Everton will probably have won the league by the time that we see some of the major train infrastructure in this country at the standard that we want it to be.
Thanks, Steve. And Andy, any final comments from yourself?
I don't think they will, actually, to be honest. But no, absolutely. I think everyone needs to think about, as Steve said, just the everyday. £4 for a bus ticket in parts of Merseyside and Greater Manchester for a single, £1.50 in London. Until that inequality is addressed, levelling up, I think, won't mean a great deal to the average person trying to get around. So that is really important, to keep bringing back people's attention to people's lived experience today. But to finish, really, in terms of you know, the ambition, I think we've articulated the ambition now. It's a modern European style layered station at Manchester Piccadilly that goes high speed north south and east west, and that's the ambition. And then once you get beyond the rail network into the city, it's a zero carbon integrated London style city regional transport system. You know, for as long as Steve and I do these jobs, we're not, everyone needs to get used to this. We are never going to accept second best. Why should we? Why should the north of England accept second best? We won't. And so, you know, if people work with us, you know, then great, let's get on and do it. But, you know, if people are going to kind of try and lower our ambitions, chip away at projects, I think that's been the experience of the last few years. And I think this is what we've got to move beyond, you know, this kind of constantly arguing about projects. We need to sort of, all of us, get on with agreeing and delivering. So I just will finish by saying something actually about the current Secretary of State, because I think he is different to his predecessor. I think he does genuinely have that same sense of ambition for the North. I was really pleased when he talked about the Northern Transport Acceleration Council, as David said. But you know, I was also keen to remind him that TfN has got a very important role in being the sort of hold the government to account for the North. So I do, you know, I've come to the kind of view that this is the moment now. It really does depend on what comes out of this integrated rail plan work. Are they ready to help Steve and I build that affordable everyday public transport system? You know, are we going to make quick progress now on clean air and the zero carbon agenda? I think we're about to find out is what I would say, and we're still in the game because we're still, the big ambition is still on the table. So that's where it is at the moment. And you know, if recovery is going to now get off on the best possible foot, I think the right thing for the government to do is to accept the ambitious vision for the North, and that in itself will create a positivity that will help us with the challenging process of recovery. So thanks, Natasha. And I'm obviously very interested in the what Caroline and the West Coast Partnership are doing. I think this is the right way for the industry to be moving away from the, you know, the silo approach and the fragmented approach. I think that has bedeviled rail investment over recent years. The Ordsall Cord is a monument to that failed approach to rail investment. I think learning from all of that and the chaos of recent years, we need to see a rail industry that buys into devolution, buys into place, and becomes a sort of willing partner in achieving the vision that Steve and I have for the northwest of England.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. Thank you, Andy. And just to close, Caroline, it would be great to hear your final comments.
Thanks, Natasha. I think I've been involved with the West Coast Main Line over about the last decade, and I think it's been really exciting to see in the last 3 or 4 years the joining up of the stakeholders across the North with that vision for achievement, for economic growth, for transport. I think we recognise we're only part of the solution, but we're certainly very much looking forward to working with you to achieve those very ambitious but quite rightly realistic aims. So yeah, that's a part we're very much looking forward to play. And just to close then, first of all, I'd like to thank Steve, Andy and David as our panellists. Thank you for joining us, and Natasha for chairing the discussion. And of course, the webinar audience, apologies again for the slightly late start. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for your questions.
Thanks, Caroline. And again, just want to echo Caroline's final statements. Big thank you to everyone, particularly our 4 panellists, for taking the time to join us today and for all their questions and energy around this topic. I'm hoping this morning has been an important step forward in, you know, echoing Andy's comments about working together, and the rail industry being a huge partner to be able to deliver the strategic vision of local authorities. So thank you for your time, and hopefully we can have some more sessions like this in the future.